Do atheists have the burden of proof? Not most of them, although I might argue that some, a very few, do. That's not what many theists say, though, because they're just ignorant of pretty much everything. Today, we get an excellent example of that in action. Won't that be fun? We're back again today with JCO Journey, and he's still rambling on about the burden of proof and completely misunderstanding every single bit of it. This might even be worse because, well, you'll see. Wait until the end because I ask what I think is a really important question, and I want your input on it. How the religious can be this clueless, and to be fair, it's not just them. I want to say that right up front because I don't want to generalize where generalization isn't necessary, but how people can be this dumb, that's really kind of a shock. It's like they're looking for problems to apply their made-up solutions to. Maybe you're just doing things wrong. So let's go watch and see.
To understand the burden of proof, it's essential to first define what a claim is. According to the Oxford English Dictionary, a claim can be defined as to assert and demand recognition of an alleged right, title, possession, attribute, acquirement, or the like. To assert as one's own, to affirm one's possession.
Wait!
That is not what that word means in this context. Seriously, I shouldn't have to explain this, but if I remember correctly, I had to fix one of his other definitions in a previous video. Come on, this really can't be that hard. So here's the definition that he should have been presenting, also from Oxford. To state or assert that something is the case, typically without providing evidence or proof. That's the verb. The noun is as follows: an assertion of the truth of something, typically one that is disputed or in doubt. That's what we're talking about here. If someone makes a claim, they are saying that that thing that they're making the claim about is true. It's a declarative statement about the state of factual reality. It is a positive claim. That's why they need to back it up. Somehow, having him pull this twice in the same video series, that's not filling me with a whole lot of confidence. But let's continue.
That's not right. It should say...
Claim is simply to contend, maintain, and assert.
And that's still wrong. It's a little less wrong, I guess, but that's not remotely as wrong as the first attempt, so we'll at least give him credit for that. Because I can make all kinds of claims about things that I don't have to back up for anyone. For example, since he's going to give one in a second, if I say that chocolate is my favorite flavor of ice cream, and it isn't, but let's pretend, then I don't have to prove that to anyone because that isn't a claim about the state of factual reality. It's just reporting on my own personal preference. There is no evidence required. How much do you want to bet that he's going to try to take an end run with the goalpost strapped to his back so that he can maintain his laughably wrong assertion about atheists? I don't know. Let's see.
For example, there is X, I believe there is X, and I lack the belief in X are all claims.
Nope. The first one is a claim. The second one is arguably a claim, as you are presumably also asserting this with your belief. X is still a thing. I lack belief in X is not a claim. It's not making a positive statement about the state of objective reality. It's just saying, I don't believe you. This guy really is an idiot, isn't he? Saying, I don't accept your claim is not in and of itself a new claim. It's simply saying that you have not been convinced that the other person's claim is factually correct. It's not even saying that I'm convinced that you're wrong. You might be able to parlay that into a claim that has to be defended, but saying, I don't buy it, that's not a claim. Not remotely. This guy's a real moron, isn't he?
All are assertions. One is a claim about the nature of reality, another is a claim on the belief states, while the other is still a claim on the belief state, but more specifically the lack of belief. They all state a position regarding a particular subject.
Then, by that definition, anything that anyone ever says, that all has to be a claim. And that's kind of what he's getting at, I think. He's just made the burden of proof so absurdly wide that it applies to every single word that comes out of anyone's mouth. How ridiculous is that? Now, according to him, I'm hungry, that's got a burden of proof that you have to present to other people. And that's just bullshit. That's why, way back when this nonsense started, I also included the caveat that you have to care about the subject enough to demand that it be backed up by the other person. If you say that you have a dog, I generally don't care. In theory, I guess you have a burden of proof for that, but only if the other person in the conversation bothers to ask you to back it up. Anyone with as big a stick up his ass as this guy obviously has, nobody is ever going to talk to him again because he'll just be making a complete pest of himself every time he talks to you. Granted, he's only doing it selectively. If a Christian said, I believe in God, he's not going to demand that they back it up, is he? Because this entire video series is just a gigantic defense mechanism. It's a way for him to shift the burden of proof away from himself, since he's the one making the actionable claims, and onto other people who just aren't. This is really getting ridiculous, and I trust no one is surprised.
In debates about the existence of a God, the statement, God exists, is a direct claim. More specifically, individuals may assert it is true that God exists, or it is false that God exists.
And in that specific circumstance, I would agree. Both sides have a burden of proof because both sides have made a positive claim. Both sides are stating positively that some fact about the real world is true. I'm with you there, which is why I challenge people who say that gods absolutely positively do not exist. Those people need to be able to back it up in some demonstrable way with objective evidence. One standard here, remember? I don't do double standards. I suspect this is about as far as this agreement is going to go, though, before it starts to devolve into desperation. So, let's see.
Both of these are direct claims about the nature of reality. On the other hand, if someone states, I lack the belief that God exists, or I'm unconvinced that God exists, this is not a negation of the original claim, but rather a rejection.
But it isn't. Saying, you have not convinced me that your proposition is true, that is not the same thing as saying your proposition is false. I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm saying that you have failed to present sufficient convincing evidence for me to conclude that you're right. And that's why I don't believe you. You have not convinced me. Now, as I've said before, you may not care if you convince me, and that's fine. That's entirely up to you. However, I am free to go out and tell other people that you have not convinced me, to point out where your arguments and your evidence is not convincing and why, at least in my own personal opinion. I can suggest that I don't think they should be convinced by it either. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying that you've got bad arguments that are not convincing. Because I think he's entirely misunderstanding what most atheists are doing. It's another case of, you need to be just like I am. Look, I'm not trying to deconvert you, because I really don't give a damn. I'm just listening to your argument and seeing if they stand up to any kind of critical scrutiny. If they do, I will change my mind to align with what you've now demonstrably said about the real world, the thing that you have proven is actually true. If not, then I won't. So far, at least, no theist has ever presented a convincing argument to me that their gods are real. Now, I'm not saying their gods aren't real, only that I am not convinced that they are. So all of this is just bullshit, based on his own fundamental misunderstanding of the actual situation at play. And really, what the hell else is new, right?
It's crucial to understand that the rejection of the claim God exists, or it is true that God exists, it is a claim itself.
But we haven't done that. That's where he's going entirely wrong. It's really sort of the difference between saying, my favorite flavor of ice cream is vanilla, and the best flavor of ice cream in the world is vanilla. One is a statement about reality, one is not. I am not convinced that your argument is true is not a statement about reality. It's a position that I hold in my head based on your complete failure to convince me of the veracity of any of your claims. This is something else that I see a lot, and not just from the religious. People get so emotionally attached to their positions that they can't see anything else. Well, of course it's true. And then they spin it so that anyone who doesn't agree, not disagrees, mind you, but simply doesn't share their views, well, those people have to be diametrically opposed to everything that they say, everything that they believe. But that's not what's going on. Not that you can ever get that through their heads, can ya?
It implies the absence of belief in the existence of a God, which requires justification to hold that position rationally.
It requires nothing remotely of the sort. This guy is a loon, but he's absolutely not alone. I see this a lot from the religious and the non-religious alike. They are fanatically invested in a position, and they can't understand that they are fundamentally out of line. Now, it's fine if he wants to believe in a God, because what the hell am I going to say to that? No skin off my nose at all. That doesn't make it factually true, though. I mean, it does that he believes, but not that the God is actually real. And if he wants me to believe that a God is real as well, specifically his God, I suppose, then he needs to convince me that his God actually exists in the common reality that we share. If he can't do that, or if he chooses not to do that, then I am welcome to go on not believing in his God because I have not been convinced that his God is real. Where he's wrong here is the assumption that there are only two possible positions. I believe X is true, or I believe X isn't true. But that's not the case. There are other alternatives out there that he doesn't want to admit to, or that he's not aware of. I can say I am not convinced, which I'm not. I am taking no position either way. I can also say, I don't care. That's the agnostic position. That's, I don't even give a damn about the question. He's really trying to turn this into a false dichotomy, which is in and of itself fallacious. And again, I doubt anybody's really surprised by that, are they?
It's even in the words. If you state something, you have effectively made a claim.
If you state something supposedly true about the world, you have made a claim. If you don't, you haven't. And that's why you need to specify positive claims. I always do that. He doesn't. That's why he goes on and on and on and on about all of this crap, entirely misunderstanding the subject matter because he's got a particular conclusion that he really likes, whereas I don't. That's something the religious have a problem with. Not just them, of course, but I'm just trying to be honest here. They assume that everyone is just like they are, and we're not. They want everyone to be just like they are, and we're not. They are fundamentally mistaken about their views on reality in this regard. I am only after the best supported view of reality that I can get to. If they cannot convince me that their view is factually correct, then I am not going to believe it. That doesn't mean I automatically embrace the opposite, that I believe they're wrong. That's the fallacious bit that they're engaged in. I am leaving the question up for grabs until someone else can take a more successful swing at it. It's why the lack of belief is not the same thing as the belief in the lack of existence. The religious have a serious problem with that. That's a them problem, not an us problem.
The importance of defining claims lies in understanding that even stating the absence of belief can be seen as a claim.
Seen as is not is. Just because you are desperate to push the burden of proof onto atheists, that doesn't mean that we have it. This is a problem of interpretation, not existence. It's the desperation for somebody else to be in the hot seat because the religious are tired of boiling in the pot. But that's their problem, not mine. They put themselves there voluntarily. If you don't want to be in the hot seat, shut up. It's that simple. If you don't open your mouth and make claims that can be challenged or doubted, then you won't have any problems, will you? Of course, their theology makes that impossible, at least for some of them, which is why they climbed up on the stove of their own free will in the first place and put their butt in the pan. Don't be a dumbass. Stop being your own worst enemy, because that's effectively what's going on here.
For instance, an atheist statement of lacking the belief in God is not a neutral position. It implies a stance that also demands justification.
But it is a neutral position. You continually saying it isn't, that doesn't change reality. We are not saying that gods aren't real. We are saying we aren't convinced that they are. That's like me saying I'm not convinced that Bigfoot exists, but that's not saying I'm convinced that Bigfoot doesn't. I haven't been convinced either way. Granted, the default position in all of these arguments is one of skepticism. This is also something that tends to confuse the religious. I don't believe in any gods, which means that I live as if no gods exist, because that is the most tenable position that I've seen. I'm not saying for sure that no gods are real, just that I see no reason whatsoever to even pretend that they do. And the same goes for Bigfoot. I am not convinced that a real existing Bigfoot is out there somewhere, and therefore I live as though Bigfoot doesn't exist. That's the default position after all. It's no different than if I had never even heard of the concept of Bigfoot. I'm living no differently today than I would if I had never been introduced to the possibility of any gods, just as you are living as if you had never heard of the possibility of the Garuda, which is a bird creature from Hindu mythology. Once you've heard of it, then you have to decide if you're going to adopt that piece of information into your mind and change how you live and change how you consider things, or continue as you always have, being unconvinced of the importance or validity of the Garuda. I'm doing the exact same thing with any gods, being completely unconvinced that they're worthwhile or real. Therefore, I'm just living as though they're not there.
By recognizing that both direct assertions and rejections are claims, we can better understand the burden of proof that both parties have in these discussions.
You're the only one that's misunderstanding stuff, not me. Why? Because he's got a vested interest in shifting the burden of proof. This isn't done because he really doesn't understand. I'm sure he gets it on some level. He's doing it because he's desperate to get off the hot seat that he's put himself in voluntarily. He wants somebody else to be sitting in the fire for a while, but he has no rational justification for what he's doing. He just really likes the idea. Now, granted, I've got no idea what's going on in his head. He could really believe this crap, which is sad if it's true, but I can't say that it's not. That's a matter of ignorance, not dishonesty. It's why I say that the religious are either dumb or dishonest or both. That's not an insult, that's just an observation. They are either dumb, not understanding the state of the world around them and not having a rational epistemic standard for determining objective truth, or they're dishonest, having such a strong emotional stake in believing this stuff that they're willing to go to any lengths whatsoever to make it seem at least plausible, even if they can't show that any of it is true, or both. And a lot are both in my experience and in my opinion. That doesn't really mean much, but these people have a lot of problems upstairs. They are desperate not to live in the real world that they actually live in. They don't care if the stuff in their head actually maps coherently onto objective reality. And that's kind of sad, isn't it?
This understanding is crucial for maintaining fair and rational discourse.
And there's that word again. Nobody said that the world was going to be fair. It's not. Stop pretending otherwise. You put yourself into this position. You can get yourself out of it, as I've already explained, but you simply refuse. That doesn't mean you get to drag other people down to your level. Calls for fairness are often just a dodge. You have your responsibilities that you simply cannot discharge. It doesn't matter what anybody else's responsibilities might be. You have failed utterly to discharge your own. Maybe you should do something about that. But no, the religious spend a lot of time, by and large, complaining about everybody else, pointing fingers outward, when they really need to focus on their own pathetic failures. That's why we see so many excuses surrounding 1 Peter 3:15. You are supposed to be able to provide a reason, hopefully a good reason, for why you believe this unsupported nonsense. Get to it. But they know that they have no good reasons, so they just make excuses for why they don't even have to try. We saw Mike Winger's video on that a long time ago, right? If you recognize that your reasons are unconvincing to others, then maybe you shouldn't believe it yourself. Go think about that for a while, because it might help.
Whether you are affirming a belief or rejecting it, you are making a statement about reality.
Still not doing either. Try to keep up. Because we're back to that false dichotomy again. He can't see that there are other options because he doesn't want it to be true. What you want doesn't matter, though, and that's something else that the religious have a hard time getting through their heads. To be honest, lots of other people do the same thing. They are so convinced that they are right that they automatically reject anyone who disagrees without considering their arguments or the things that other people have pointed out about the failures of their own. Because they just don't care, do they? That's a human problem, but it is an irrational problem nonetheless.
Or at the very least, your reality, that requires evidence or reasoning.
My reality is the one that has all the evidence for it. That's because I only care about the truth. That's why I am not impressed with your claims, but that's something else entirely, isn't it? I go where the evidence leads. You are making claims without sufficient evidence to back any of them up. That's why I'm not convinced by your claims. When you come up with evidence, come on back and we can talk, because until you can do that, I am going to continue to be unconvinced by your unsupported claims. That's how this works. It's kind of sad that you can't figure that out, but there you go.
This understanding of defining a claim and how both direct and indirect assertions require justifications are foundational for any rational discourse, especially those about the existence of a God.
Sorry, but gods aren't special. Gods don't get special dispensation because you really like them. I think that's another problem with the religious, because they have an all-consuming passion for their imaginary friends that I don't think are remotely justified in the real world. Because here's something else that they just don't like. If they could prove that a God was real, any God, take your pick, I'd just adjust my view of reality to include that God and move on with my life. I wouldn't be bowing down to said gods unless I thought that I had good justification. And I'm sorry, fear that I'll get smited or sent to some kind of eternal torment, that's not a good reason to worship a god. That's actually a good reason to hate one, but not to follow one. Because I don't live my life in fear like the religious tend to do. So that's another preconception that they need to be disabused of. I find their entire outlook to be childish and pathetic. How about you?
Stay tuned as I try to delve deeper into the burden of proof and how it applies to both theists and atheists. But again, thanks for watching a lot.
He's just going to make more empty claims, entirely misunderstand the conversation, and run around with the goalposts while he desperately tries to get off the hot seat and push other people on. I'm not really impressed with this, are you? Now, I don't have any idea what he's going to do in the next 6 or so videos, something like that. Although he could have done more since the last time I looked, but this is all starting to feel very samey, isn't it? Maybe you're getting something else out of it. Let me know down in the comments if you are. But for me, this is just the same thing over and over and over again. Him misrepresenting the burden of proof, misrepresenting atheism, not understanding the fundamental disconnect that he has with reality, and pretending that he gets to tell others what they believe, when, in fact, he doesn't. We don't believe that. That's not how this works. We are not doing what he's claiming that we're doing. In fact, often we're doing the polar opposite. This is really common among the religious. At least I find that it is, mostly because of this silly, "you're really just like I am" crap, when we are anything but. Get out of your own echo chamber and learn to deal with the real world. It's nice out here, I promise. We got cookies and everything. So let me know what you think below, and if you think it's really worthwhile continuing. I'll do at least one or two more because it'll take me that long to get your feedback. But if people vote to give up, and I'm kind of leaning it that way myself, then maybe that's what we'll do. There's only so many times you can spout the same misconception over and over and over again before people in the audience get bored. So let me know what you think, because seriously, I am not at all impressed.